Welcome to Medspa Secrets. I'm Ben Chu.
And I'm Jen Bullock.
And on today's episode, we want to talk to you guys all about starting off your med spa or aesthetics clinic with your very first device. Jen, I know we kind of told the story a little bit about how Illume, or you, got your first device and started off the practice. For those that maybe didn't see episode 1, can we just kind of reiterate how you picked and got your first device?
Sure. Well, I wouldn't recommend going about things the way that I did it. But when I first started out, I knew that I wanted to open an aesthetic clinic. And instead of just like doing my research, I bought a device without any business, without any plan. I cashed out my retirement and I bought a $150,000 laser. Now, in like the back of my mind, I justified this. I'm not crazy, but I had thought to myself, I was like, well, all I have to do is sell one treatment and I'm just gonna one treatment a month or whatever to make the payment, and I'm gonna sell it to all of my girlfriends and all the nurses that I work with. And so I was really just very lucky that everything worked out the way it did, but I didn't even have like a plan. I didn't know how to inject yet. Like I hadn't done anything. I just bought the laser and I was like, let's do it. And I think that that's really actually a lot more common than people realize, because you think, oh gosh, the laser reps will tell you all kinds of stuff and it seems like a great idea and you're super excited and you've got all this passion, and how can it not work out? Because look at how much money everybody's making. But you got to be really careful about selecting your first device and also knowing what it is that you want to do.
Right, like what kind of practice you might want to be, because there are a lot of different sort of niches or styles, if you will, in the aesthetics community. It's not like every single med spa or every single plastic surgery company or practice rather has essentially the same menu and the same suites of procedures.
Right.
And some devices are going to offer a whole bunch of different things they can do. Some lasers are like Swiss Army knives with all sorts of attachments and heads. And then like also there's like, say, like a cool sculpting device where all it does is cool sculpting. So you kind of should know a little bit about like what your practice is going to be about. What are you going to pair this device with? Is it going to be your solo only offering? Are you going to do injectables and other med spa treatments that are not device-based? So, I mean, that probably bears a little bit of a sort of conversation about like, do you need a device, or can you do injectables only? Or like, do you want to pair them together? And I think that's something that most people should really give some strong consideration to before they decide to jump into the deep end. Kind of like, what do you think about that?
Well, so I think it would have made more sense for me. And if I had to do it over again, I probably would have really just honed my injecting skills, right? Built my patient avatar out, my client base, and then stepped into buying a laser. I mean, it really put a little fire under my rear end, because I had this very expensive device and I didn't pay it all cash for it. I was still making a payment, but it's easier if you, first of all, have an established clientele, right? And then going out and figuring out like, what do my clients want, right? So if you were talking about niching down. Do you want to be an aesthetics clinic that does Botox filler and laser hair removal? Do you want to be a clinic that specializes in tattoo removal? I mean, because you can really just go in all kinds of directions, but really deciding what it is that you want to do, making sure that you have established patient clientele and that you are bringing a device that makes sense for your population, right?
For sure. I think that's a really good point. Like, most devices are going to be in some kind of six-figure range, right? So like when you make a device, you're making a big commitment.
Right.
With injectables, you're not gonna, in most cases, you're not gonna be dropping six figures on a stockpile of injectables like right out of the gate. And you can kind of leverage up by, you buy some injectables, you treat some patients, you buy some more, you treat even more patients, and yada yada, and you can kind of build up. And there are practices out there that do only injectables, and they're seven-figure practices.
Yes.
But someone might argue that your margin on injectables is never going to be as good as your margin on device-based services. Because most practices are marking up their injectables about 100%, right? Like, let's say you're paying $6 a unit for Botox and then you sell it for $12 a unit, right?
Right.
But with a laser service or a cool sculpting service, whatever the case may be, just let's say a device X.
Right.
There's sometimes some consumable, but usually it's like maybe only like 5 or 10% of the total cost of the treatment that the patient is paying, not 50% like an injectable.
Right.
You got to choose, right? Like, you can make a lot more money, a lot more profit, a lot more margin on devices in the long term than you're ever going to make on injectables, but there's a bigger cost to get a device.
Right.
And you can't sort of kind of piecemeal your way up like you can with injectables, which is, I think, probably why most locations actually pair them to some extent. Though there are places out there that are, say, just injectables places or just cool sculpting or just laser or whatever.
Right. And I think that that do that really niche down, they do really, really well. And there's some simplicity in that. But like for a practice like ours, I really focus on combining like laser, so energy-based devices, skincare, and injectables. And that's like our platform. And so we kind of we have a little something for everyone, but everybody's going to go along the same. When you're first starting out, sometimes it makes sense to niche down. But if I were to give advice about your first purchase for like when you're ready and you're like, I am gonna take the plunge, I'm getting myself a device, I think that picking one of the platforms that have a multitude of things that it does is a really smart way to go. For us, our very first device was something called a Venus Versa, and it was inexpensive. It was 150,000 or 140,000, whatever it was at the time. I don't remember. I got it fully loaded, and it was laser hair removal, it was IPL, it was body contouring, it was some nanofractional ablation. It provided a lot of different things, and so I could do just about anything for anybody, and it wasn't like a specialist at any one thing, but it did a good job. And it's one of those devices that is still used in the practice today. It's been 6 years, it's still up and running, it's a workhorse, it's a great device, paid it off, it's wonderful. I don't know that I would buy that particular device a second time, but picking something that has multifunction so that you can do more things and offer more stuff for your patients is probably, that would be the one thing that I would say about choosing your device. Also, make sure like the population that you serve. Don't pick a device. If you live in an area where half of your population are Fitzpatrick's 4 and above, don't get a device that only treats patients who are 1 through 4, right? You're gonna cut out a huge percentage of your population. So making sure that the device you choose makes sense for where you are. It's doing the services that are going to serve your clientele. So.
Absolutely. You need to make sure that whichever device you get and whichever way you're going to niche down, that you definitely have a market to offer match.
Yes.
Right? You want it to work out really well for the bulk of the population that is in your area that is going to be receiving those services. Otherwise, you're probably going to struggle a little. I think that it's great to definitely start out with one of those kind of Swiss Army knife type devices, but again, we've also seen people do really well, that people that were like sure they wanted to niche down into like only weight loss and just bought cool sculpting machines. We have friends like Admire Aesthetics that they've got multiple locations, they do really well. I'm sure they're over a 7-figure business, and like that's all they do, but they've built the reputation as like they are the fat loss people. And even though other practices might have cool sculpting in the area as an add-on, like anybody that thinks about weight loss is gonna think Admire. Right? So if you are going to go down the route of getting a device that only does one thing, you're also going to need to do the marketing and brand building work to make sure that you are known as the place for that only one thing.
Yeah. Yes. So that actually takes me to our next item. What do you think about like new versus used? Like a lot of people when they're starting out, the idea of getting something that's used might sound attractive because it's less money and the payment might be a little bit less. What are your thoughts about that?
In general, whether someone is starting out or not, I have never been a fan of used equipment. I mean, yes, it's very sexy that you might get it for just a percentage of the original sale price, but there's like a lot of undisclosed potential downsides that come with it. You don't know what like true wear and tear might be on the device.
Right.
If something, well, like point in case with our Vizia machine, right? We bought that secondhand.
I did.
And we got a fabulous price on it. I mean, it's kind of a little bit of a different device since it's diagnostic rather than treatment, but the point stands. It was damaged slightly in shipping.
Yes.
And had the manufacturer and the actual maker of it shipped it to us, that would have been totally covered. And they would have taken it back and fixed it or just sent us a new one. But we had to go through a lot of extra work and spend a lot of extra money because we bought it secondhand to deal with the shipping damage and then with some other issues that it had. So like there are shipping issues when you buy secondhand. There are then warranty issues as well because you're not the original purchaser, and many warranties are not transferable to secondhand owners, third-hand owners, whatever. They stick with the original purchaser. And some, I don't think all, but some device manufacturers have kind of caught on to the fact that there is a somewhat large and growing secondhand market for devices in the aesthetics world. And like, they want people to buy new devices, right? So like, they don't necessarily do a great job of supporting the secondhand purchaser. And in some cases, they're going to make you pay fees.
Big fees, huge,
bigly fees.
Bigly fees, yes.
To
recertify it.
Yeah, to recertify it,
Yes.
to get you a new warranty if you want to add on a new warranty to it, if that's even something they will do. There's going to be training fee. They're going to charge you for the training on it, whereas they wouldn't necessarily, it would have been part of the package had you been the original purchaser. I just think there's a really strong case for buying new equipment, and there's a really strong case for saying, caveat emptor, buyer beware, when you are buying secondhand equipment, and there's a lot of due diligence you need to do that might not be the best kind of dovetail fit for somebody that's just starting out.
Right. And case in point, like I have bought all of my devices new except for that Vizia. And even with my new device, I had 2 of them arrive damaged in transit. So I got a brand new device, had a screen broken when it arrived. So I couldn't use it right away. Had another device fire up and it just wouldn't fire. So, I mean, even with brand new equipment, there can be problems. And so having a rep to support you is super helpful, which actually takes me to my next little thing. And that is when those reps come to see you, they're going to come to see you and they're going to have big stories. They're going to have big numbers and they're going to want to tell you how incredible this next new purchase is going to be. It's
how much money you're going to make.
You're going to make so much money. It's going to revolutionize your practice and you should buy not one, but these 2 or 3 devices because they're going to pair really well together. So let's talk about that a little bit.
That's a bit to unpack. So I think we kind of want to really look at that in sort of 2 unpackings.
Yes.
One being the financial projections that reps are going to share with you. Now, it's not fraud. They're not lying to you per se, but there's definitely omission. Okay, so they're going to show you a very kind of just single line financial projection of like, this is how much it costs. This is how much for the machine. This is how much a MSRP of a single retail service is going to be. Therefore, if you do X number of services in a month, usually a pretty small number, then the machine will pay for itself, and every treatment that you do over X will be just money hand over fist that you're pulling into the practice. However, there are a couple business realities that are omitted or not included in that kind of a financial projection. For one, they're simply not factoring in how much it costs you to acquire each new patient in the first place, right? Because it does actually cost money to get new patients and bring them into the practice. People don't just show up randomly and magically and then buy the service and fit neatly into the financial model that the reps are sharing with you. It's going to cost you money in advertising. It's going to cost you money in paying someone to do the sales calls, the follow-up, the scheduling of getting the person in there, and that is not reflected in their models because they just showed the cost of the device. They're also not including anything like gross overhead, right? It costs you money to rent a building. It costs you money to provide that building with utilities like water and electricity. It costs you money to staff that building. It costs you money to put toilet paper in the bathrooms and all of these other little things that are going to comprise your sort of just general gross overhead. And that means that each room, essentially, or each viable treatment area where treatments could be being performed in your practice has kind of like a baseline cost that's going to be anywhere from like maybe 40 or 50 bucks a day to just have that room empty and existing to be able to receive patients, to maybe a couple $100s a day, depending on the size of your facility and where it's located and what rents are like. And that's simply not factored into the financial numbers either, because again, they're just telling you how much the laser costs. Right? So if you actually work out all of the financials and then plug in the cost of the laser and the price of the treatments, you actually come up with a very different number from what the reps are showing you. And you need to do that work, and you need to look at the number and you need to say, okay, is this number now a negative number? Because that means that this device is not a good decision. Or more likely, is this device now showing me a number that's just significantly less revenue or less profit rather than what was kind of indicated by the simple financial projections, and then are you really willing to work for like that little profit? Or and maybe you are, and then it just at least gives you an idea of that, like what you're getting into.
Right. And for like from a provider's perspective, I feel like when we have a new device, we're really excited about what we've seen, the before and afters. The rep is going to tell you all the good stuff, and you're so thrilled and you're so excited, but it's hard to sell something when you haven't seen the results on your own patients, right? So I do feel like there's a certain amount of like being comfortable with sales, being comfortable with the device. And once you're through that first excitement phase where like the people that are already kind of in your funnel and already interacting with you, they've done the initial purchase, how you keep people engaged. And I do feel like there's a little bit of a learning curve that comes with that. And if you aren't good at that, you can get stuck making a payment that you really aren't getting the revenue in return yet.
Yeah, and that kind of brings us to like the second issue of like, okay, like you've seen the simple financial projection, but then you add all the numbers in it, like maybe it makes sense to buy one, but does it truly make sense to buy multiples like the reps are telling you? Because they're going to try to sell you a bunch of machines and maybe even throw in some kind of sweet seeming discount, which is going to seem sweet on the face.
Yes, it always is a really big discount. You buy one, it's $80,000 or $120,000. You buy two, you're going to get that for like $60,000, and it seems like a huge savings.
But you still have to do the math.
You have to do the math. And the reality is in those forums, like we're part of an owner's forum, we're part of like I'm in several injecting groups and things like that. And I see people on a regular basis who have bought devices and in their mind, they don't have the population. They bought two and only one's getting utilized. They don't have the staff to run them. I mean, there's just so many things. And so people are trying to unload them on the secondary market, or just bleeding money financially trying to make that payment. Because when you're first starting out, a $3,000 a month payment, or duplicate that by 2 or 3 devices, that's $9,000 or $10,000. That's a lot of money if you're not effectively selling the treatments, or even worse, if the device doesn't deliver what you thought it was going to, right?
For sure. So like you have to do the math for one. And for more than one, you even more so have to do the math, right? Because that means you're going to need to actually acquire that many more patients in order to have all of those machines humming and running all day long every day. And again, all of those patients are going to have a cost to acquire. I mean, every room that you're going to put a laser in is going to have a cost to operate. You just got to really know the math. You have to understand what your business can sustain in its current incarnation. And then you need to make your decisions based off of that, and not what sweet words your rep is listening to, or is saying to you rather.
Right.
Because like, their motivations are different than your motivations. You're trying to build a thriving business that will support you and your family and your staff, and maybe even create a legacy, maybe retire someday. That is not the goal of your rep. Their goal is to sell you a machine so that they can hit their goals and their sales quotas from the company that they're working for. And you've got two very different motivations meeting in the middle to hopefully create a mutually beneficial situation, but that's not always how it ends up. So like once you've done the math and you've decided whether or not the machine makes sense or the machines make sense, you then need to look at the next part, which is going to be, how are you going to pay for these? Are you actually going to be paying for them out of treatments that you're doing because you're financing it? Are you going to buy them just straight up with cash and just buy the whole thing? If you do decide to finance, what are the interest rates going to be like? Are there penalties for paying it off early? Or are there no penalties, but you can pay it off early, but you still have to pay all of the interest? Maybe you can talk kind of about your experience with that side of things.
I want to make sure that you guys know that like I am a huge fan of technology. And so like we're talking about all these things, and it's not, I don't want to like give the idea that you shouldn't buy a device, because they're awesome. They can bring so much value. I love the technology. But we've also had to learn some painful lessons along the journey, because I've bought 5 devices now, and the things that we've experienced, sometimes there are people in the industry that are kind of shady. My very first laser was a great experience. I didn't have to pay any interest, and I had it paid off in like 2 years. It was great. And so when I went into my second loan, I didn't have the money to slap down $120,000 for my next device. And so I worked with a loan officer who was referred from the laser company. It was
third-party financing company.
And I thought I asked all the right questions. And what I ended up in was a loan that feel good, because when I wanted to pay it off, what I realized, I had asked, are there any prepayment penalties and all of this kind of stuff? And the loan officer said, absolutely not. But what he didn't tell me is that I could pay it off early, but I would have to pay the same amount of interest, the same amount of money, no matter what. I wouldn't save anything. And so to me, like, well, yes, he was telling the truth. It also left me in a loan that I didn't have any choice and I couldn't get out of. When it comes to like financing going forward now, a friend of ours who also has a very, successful practice, she doesn't buy machines unless she has the money to buy them. So she knows, I am going to buy a new cool sculpting device. I'm going to save up the money until I have it to buy it. And so she just sets that as her goal. And
that may not be practical for someone that's totally starting out, and like we get that, but you need to, if you're not going to just pay cash for machines, you need to go through your loan documents and your agreements with a fine-tooth comb and a magnifying glass. You need to ask a lot of questions. You need to ask, is there a prepayment penalty? No. Okay, great, cool. So then if I pay it off early, I won't have to pay all of the interest over time, right?
Yes.
And then if they say, oh, well, no, well, then you need to talk a little bit more. You say, okay, well, how does this work? Are there other financing options? Is there maybe a different device that I should buy from a different company that does the same thing? Or does the manufacturer work with different third-party loans so that you're not like stuck with a loan from a loan shark that's going to say like, well, technically it's not a penalty because we're not charging you even more, but there's no benefit to paying it off early either. Like, you just really need to do your due diligence, right? Like,
and a lot of people will work with their local banks, because really a local bank knows you. There's a personal relationship, and oftentimes they have better interest rates and better opportunities for working with local businesses. So that's what going forward, if I were to finance again, it would probably be with a local bank, but currently probably would just
pay cash,
put the money aside until I'm ready to buy it, right? And make that the priority for the year. So
to kind of recap, if you're just starting out and you want to get that first device, really first you got to think like, am I going to be an injectables practice or a device practice? Am I going to be both? Are you going to niche down into like just one type of device, like say maybe just cool sculpting? Or are you going to have devices that can do multiple things and then have a big menu? You've got to really niche down on the practice side of things. You got to decide whether you're going to go with new or used and really weigh the benefits of both. Lower cost versus lower support and warranty and all of that kind of stuff. You need to make sure that your offerings are pairing up and matching with your market. You need to decide how many you're going to buy, if the juice is worth the squeeze, really dial out those financials, and then you need to decide how you're going to pay.
Yep.
So, I mean, hopefully that helps you out, and I really hope that you can get your new device, start out your new practice, or if you're an existing practice, you can maybe have a little bit more wisdom or benefit going forward to getting new machines. And if you got any value out of this, please hit that like and thumbs up, give us a subscribe so that we can keep on sharing more Medspa secrets with you.
All right. See you later, guys.
Bye!